Hi everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of my trail trek from Lake Louise to Lake Agnes. I'm still on the top of Mount White. So if you tuned into the last episode where I started off at Lake Louise, you would see that as soon as I got to Mount White, at the peak there, I turned to the right and followed the mountain all the way down to what's called the Big Beehive. And there you could see Lake Louise. Now in front of me, you can see Lake Agnes because instead of going right towards the Big Beehive, I've now gone down to the left. So you can see Lake Agnes there, and as I pan up, there's the Devil's Thumb, which is another big landmark that people come out to see. So I'm going to continue to trek up there to the left on top of Mount White and just get you a nice bird's eye view of Lake Agnes as I get closer to the Devil's Thumb. Devil's Thumb. You hear me talking to myself, as I do very, very often during all of my hiking. So I'm just being careful on this edge because it is just a complete drop off down, and then maybe I'd go tumbling and bounce right into Lake Agnes. But of course, my mother would be quite distraught to find out if that happened to me. So I'm going to be super, super careful. And again, I'm still on my phone right now. Just bear with me for a few more moments, and then I'm going to switch over to the GoPro and get you some really, really beautiful footage. Right now, the GoPro is still a little hot, but the battery has been charged up and it's looking good. So again, there's Lake Agnes. And if you tuned into my last episode with Lake Louise, I was mentioning how different the colors of the two lakes are. Which is interesting because the two lakes are almost side by side. They're just separated by the mountain that I'm on top of right now, which is Mount White. But as I mentioned before, Lake Louise is glacier fed, so it gives it that kind of white and turquoise hue where Lake Agnes isn't. So it has a very different kind of color to it. It's like this beautiful deep blue. So there's the Devil's Thumb just up. I tried to find a trail to climb up on top of it, but there was nothing. So instead, I'm going to stick to the Highline Trail, which is where I started just after Lake Louise. And so right now, I'm going to be doing a series of switchbacks as I descend the opposite side of Mount White that I had initially climbed up. So climbing down this side of the mountain is going to take me down to Lake Agnes there. And this side of the mountain is not as steep or as long. It's quite a different and shorter trek down to the lake, mainly because it's just in one area where I don't have to go through the whole side of the mountain here. I can just kind of stick to this one isolated area to get me down to the mountain. I mean, I would say that it's steep if you're climbing up the mountain, of course, but I'm going down, so it's kind of a nice break because coming up the other side of Mount White, it was super steep at the end there. So now I get to descend Mount White. It's kind of a nice break for me. Okay, so I just want to head into some cuts there to speed us up. You can see that the trail is not too long down the side of Mount White and down to Lake Agnes here. And there's a huge rock pile behind me. And then, of course, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Lake Agnes in front of me there. And as you can see in front of me, the trail I'm trekking on is quite narrow and very, very rocky. So I'm just taking my time, one, because I don't want to slip and hurt my ankle, and two, I want to make sure I can let you guys take in the beautiful view here. And that mountain there in front of me, now off to the left, is called Mount St. Piran, and I'm going to eventually make my way over to it and hike along the side of it. I'm not going to hike up it, I'm just going to hike along it and then kind of circle back around to Lake Louise, where we started in the last video. So as you can see now, I have switched back to the GoPro. I took a few moments when I got down to the bottom of the mountain just to get the GoPro ready to go again, because I really wanted to bring you Lake Agnes with GoPro footage because it's so gorgeous. And I've thrown on the wide angle view. So I'm really hoping that it's able to get you the huge landscape in front of me here. You can hear the water rushing. There is another little stream here, if you can see through the rocks, just above my shadow. So off to the right is Mount White, off to the left is Mount St. Piran, and then of course in the middle is beautiful Lake Agnes. So there is no trail right now. If I was to go up around this rock pile, there is still that very narrow trail I was on just a few moments ago. But I'm going to climb down on the rock bed here just because I really want to get nice and close to Lake Agnes and get some beautiful views for you. And for myself, of course. So you can see off to the right that little very narrow trail there. Okay, so I went and climbed on down, just did a quick jump cut there to get me through because it was just me climbing on rocks. And, well, and what's more exciting, rock climbing or the cute chipmunk, right? Let's be honest here. So, again, more chipmunks. I'm going to get you nice and close here to Lake Agnes. Just gorgeous. So you can tell how much darker blue Lake Agnes is compared to Lake Louise. And you can hear the water rushing in the back there. Of course, all of the lakes, or the majority of the lakes, are typically funneled by another source. Lake Louise is funneled by glaciers, as I mentioned before. Lake Agnes is not. So I'm just walking off to the side of Lake Agnes. That is Mount White there in the distance. That is where I came from. And over on the other side of Mount White is Lake Louise, where we started in the last video. This is Mount St. Piran right now. I'm just on the bottom edge of it. I'm not going to be climbing up it, just along the edge here, just as I basically just trek along the side of Lake Agnes until I get to the main starting point up to the front. So again, just like Lake Louise, we have trees on either side of us. These trees aren't very tall, not like the ones we saw at Sulphur Mountain just the other day. And it doesn't really give us much shade either. So again, just making sure you're wearing a cap or you got lots of sunscreen and lots of water, because today is very sunny and there's no overcast. There is a bit of clouds up there, but as you can see, it is quite a beautiful blue sky today. So I just did a cut down to the lake here. I'm just walking along the side of it. There's Mount White that we trekked down. Now we're just coming around the side of it. The water's so clear, so beautiful. So we are on Mount St. Piran right now. The two mountains, Mount White to my right-hand side and Mount St. Piran on the left here that I'm trekking on, are separated by Lake Agnes. I'm still on the Highline Trail. That trail starts me at Lake Louise, takes me all the way up Mount White, and then up at the top of Mount White we can see Devil's Thumb, we can see the big beehive, and then we trek down Mount White, still following the Highline Trail, and it takes us down here to Lake Agnes. So it is quite a long trail, but definitely worth the trek. If you want to do it, you're going to have to set aside the whole day to do this. You could probably get this done in less than 6 hours, but I think you're going to be exhausted after. So it's definitely a full day's adventure. So there is a trail I'm walking on. It's just kind of hard to see because it's not very distinct. It's very, very rocky here. I just like to slow down and give you views of the mountain with the lake there. It's just so gorgeous. And just mesmerizing. So I'm just going to slow down and let some people pass me. I am getting towards the end of the Lake Agnes trail right now. And it's going to take me to a little tea house, which is just up here on my left. But the reason why I try to cut out all that footage is just because there is a huge crowd of people there, and there's tons of children. I don't want to get anyone's faces on camera, so I just want to cut that chunk out. But you're not really missing much. What I wanted to show you here was just coming down past the tea house, and showing you this beautiful, beautiful waterfall. So I actually stopped in at the tea house and I talked to one of the servers there, and she said there is no running water here. There's no pipes that are bringing them running water. So when they're making you tea, they come out and they get water from this waterfall, which is coming from Lake Agnes. So that's pretty cool. So come and fill up your own water bottle and then continue on with your trek. So the tea house is probably maybe 100 meters behind me. I just wanted to cut out a bit of that footage because it was a very, very popular area. A lot of people will hike from Lake Agnes just to go to that tea house and kind of chill out and get some food and get some tea. I didn't want to get their faces on camera, so I cut that chunk out like I mentioned, and I'm just going to continue down the Highline Trail along Mount St. Piran here, and it's going to eventually loop me back around to Lake Louise. So there's just a few switchbacks I'm going to follow down the side of Mount St. Piran here. Nothing too crazy. It's not very steep and the terrain's relatively flat, so it's a significantly easier part of the trail than what I did coming up Mount White. So just down at the bottom here is this little lake, which is called Mirror Lake. Up in the top there you can see Devil's Thumb just above it. We were actually standing on the edge of Devil's Thumb just earlier looking down at Lake Agnes, and now we're at Mirror Lake looking up at Devil's Thumb. So it's really cool to get all those kinds of dynamic views and perspectives while on a hike. So Mirror Lake was kind of just its own little pit stop. Very cute little lake there. It was getting super crowded and there was tons of people coming in behind me that wanted to go up and take pictures. So I didn't want to take too much time. I got some nice footage, I hope, and then just kind of move on. And of course, let other people enjoy the scenery as well. And I got more of the trail to show you anyway. So you can see here we're still on Mount St. Piran, just walking down the trail towards what we will eventually do to loop back around to Lake Louise. And you can see there's a lot more trees here. It's still very, very sunny, but there is some nice shade here. So my GoPro is very happy. as I was coming down this trail as well, I saw lots of signs where there are horse pictures, just saying, that this is a common trail for horseback riders. And I crossed paths with some horses, and they were they were really, really lovely. I figured that the poop that I was dodging wasn't necessarily bear poop. It looked more like horse poop to me. And of course, as I passed the signs and then I passed a bunch of horses, I'm like, okay, poop suspicion confirmed, I guess. But I mean, I guess it's better that it's horse poop than bear poop, because I'm not really interested in having any encounters with some grizzly bears. I think I've lucked out so far with that. And the great thing about these trails is that they are very popular. There's tons of people on them at all times, and the bears don't want to be around people. So I'm not saying don't be cautious and don't be careful, but I am saying, it is relatively safe. So I'm really digging this woodland feel right now. I like how it's almost a completely different kind of trail than what I was just on up at the mountain and over at Lake Louise. So it's nice to have this dynamic trail change throughout. Just touching all aspects of hiking is very cool. From mountains to lakes to the forest and woodland. It's really nice. So I'm not sure if you saw before in the first video, I didn't really show too much of it, but where we started off at Lake Louise by the there, you can hear me in the background be like, oh my gosh, it's Lake Louise, I found it, because I was wondering, like, when is Lake Louise coming up? I've been hiking forever. But this sound I was mentioning kind of gave it away, because the hotel there, the Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise Hotel, it's under some construction right now, so it's kind of loud and you can probably hear it. So as soon as I heard that noise, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a hotel. I heard it when I was at Lake Louise. I hear it again. I'm like, finally, I've reached Lake Louise. I was following the map on my phone. I was like, oh, Lake Louise should be coming up soon. I'm like, I don't see it. And then I heard the noise. I was like, oh my God. I was like, don't get lost. But yeah, so sorry for all that construction noise, but I just want to continue to show you where I'm going. So if you are interested in seeing how this loops back around, or potentially walking this yourself, you can kind of see how the trail reconnects back to Lake Louise. And again, we are on the Highline Trail as well. So that's Lake Louise up to the left. We made it. So it is, I've been out here for many hours. It's about noon right now. It's starting to get super busy. There's tons of people everywhere. I'm trying my best to get some footage without showing too many people. So I'm going to just keep turning my camera as politely as I can away from people. But there is Lake Louise. I've made it back. I'm so happy. It's been a wonderful morning and early afternoon. But Lake Louise is a pleasant sight, because at first, for a while there, after I got out of Lake Agnes, I'm like, where is Lake Louise? I was supposed to loop back around, and I was starting to get a little nervous. But I'm glad that I've made it. Yeah, so I got lots of people around. I'm trying to show you how the trails reconnect here, but we got people here. I'm just trying to politely film around them, or at least not get their faces the best that I can. But there's Lake Louise, and there's the hotel. We're just right back at where we started.
Watch your finger. Your other finger.
And there it is. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with some pictures now as I give you the stats. So today's trail was the Highline Trail. We started off at Lake Louise. We went up to Devil's Thumb, to the Big Beehive, and then down Mount White to Lake Agnes, around on Mount St. Piran to loop back to Lake Louise. That whole hike was 16.25 kilometers. The elevation was 763 meters, which was actually, that was Mount White. That was 763 meters. And that was my climb up. So Sulphur Mountain was about 816 meters. So this one was shorter. not as tall, but I would say near the end it was just as steep. And all together, including where I started from Lake Louise and that 5.5 kilometers of hiking, that does take me to the 16.25 kilometers. And in total, it was 6 hours and 30 minutes of hiking today. So I am a little spent. It was definitely a wonderful day. I got to see 2 lakes and 2 mountains. There's Devil's Thumb there in front of you. I highly recommend this trail. Again, take lots of water and sunscreen. I really, really hope you enjoyed the 2 parts of this video. And as always, keep trekking.